Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We'll get started here in about the next 30 seconds as people join in. Thank you for being here. Really excited for this conversation. Let us know any questions in the meantime in the chat, and we'll get to them through the conversation. Okay, I think we're good to get started officially this time. Thank you everybody again for joining us and joining United Way's Pride Month event supporting our LGBTQ community, part of a Learn United series designed to highlight different areas within our community and bring out different voices. My name is Solonas Karoulla. Solo is also very much acceptable, he, him, and I am a relationship manager here with United Way of Central Ohio. Today, we'll be exploring the history, the resiliency of the LGBTQ+ community here in Central Ohio, as well as the structures, the programs to support them in general. Please give a big round of applause, and I hope everybody at home is clapping right now to these three amazing humans that are with me today. Amazing, fierce community leaders. I wanna and hope I can call everybody a friend. So please join me in welcoming Kimberly Griffiths, she, her, Executive Director of OCTOPUS LLC, Tom Grote, he, him, Chief Catalyst of the Edge Innovation Hub, and Karen Hewitt, Z, her, she, her, Deputy Director of Kaleidoscope Youth Center. And on top of all that, all the amazing stuff all three of you do for our community. So thank you, and I'm actually gonna clap because you deserve it. So thank you all. I'm going to start off by asking everybody, and you can all take your time to answer this as you please. If you could share, a little bit about yourselves, your backgrounds, how you got to where you are today. So who do we want to start with? Kimberly?
Get my mouse in the right spot there to unmute myself. Thank you, Solo. I guess as far as background goes, I have a Bachelor of Arts degree and an MLIS degree for a Master's Library and Information Science and a JD, so a lawyer. I'm Executive Director of OCTOPUS LLC, which is organizing communities, transgender outreach, promoting united support, and I use pronouns she, her, hers. My wife of 24 years, Sally, is my wise and loving rock of support. I have two children, Justin 39 and Heather 35. Justin and Carolyn are parents to my grandchildren, Michaela and Cody. Michaela goes by Kayla now, not Michaela. And I fortunately received great love and support from them all. My background includes attorney, librarian, real estate agent, commercial mortgage banking, and more. I did not transition until 2014, full-time in 2015. And then I began volunteering and created OCTOPUS on April 18th, 2017. As far as the work I do, I'm a transgender community advocate and mentor, facilitator and sponsor of multiple trans peer support groups, including for incarcerated folks at Warren Correctional. Sponsor and attorney with the Ohio Name and Gender Change Legal Clinics, a presenter, trainer, and keynote speaker, Columbus City School Trans Policy Advisor, leadership team for Greater Columbus, LGBTQ Health Coalition, the steering committee for the LGBTQ Leadership Roundtable. I've been trained as street medic, mental health first aid assistant, and ACLU Advocacy University. I created OCTOPUS Weekly Bulletin, which is a trans community resource publication that I put out weekly. I'm striving to build community cohesion, increase peer support, localized resource accessibility, networking, and education through rural and urban outreach. So that's kind of me.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'm just gonna go now. I think you can moderate this conversation without me. So I appreciate that background, and we're also thankful for your service to our community and everything you do. Tom, do you want to go next?
I sure will. Thank you so much, Solo. So Tom Grote, he, him, his. I I'm from Columbus. I was literally probably conceived in a Donato's Pizza, the very first one. A lot of people don't know that story. I'll stop there. And I grew up behind the first Donato's Pizza shop on the south side of Columbus, which is still there today, on Thurman Avenue. I grew up making pizzas. I've probably made over 1 million pizzas in my life. A lot of people might not know that. Literally made about 1 million pizzas. And I was pretty closeted throughout my grade school, high school, college, and did not come out. After college, I went to work full-time with the business. We had 7 pizza shops, started helping to grow the company, closeted from myself. Did not come out until I was about 26 when I met somebody who I fell in love with, which all of a sudden made all the pieces fit together. I kind of had to fall in love. And I said to myself, well, how can love be bad? How can love be bad? And that really melted away, although it took years of therapy to deal with all the internalized homophobia bullshit that I had, which put me in some pretty dark spaces where I was in spaces where life-threatening spaces, frankly. But I came through it, and love kind of led the way for me. We had some really good things happen at Donato's, and I got to lead. Oh, before that, with my first husband, we opened up Out on Main Restaurant, which was in the mid 90s to about 2003 in Columbus. It was the very first LGBTQ business in Columbus that had windows and signage. And the whole idea was to welcome our community and family and friends in a very welcoming, safe space where we could be very proud about our history and culture. And that's what the restaurant was all about. I ended up, some good things happened to us and leaving, and I was privileged to be asked to be the state chair for the campaign against the gay marriage amendment in Ohio in 2004. We lost, we were pissed, and a group of us founded Equality Ohio in 2005. It was a good day. It was really cool, and it was a very, very much a statewide effort and a group effort with a lot of good folks coming together. I was the first openly gay person appointed to the Miami University Board of Trustees, which was really cool because I was closeted when I went to school there, so that was different. And then I was the second openly LGBTQ person to be asked to be on the board of United Way, where we started the very first Pride United. It's the very first LGBTQ donor group and volunteer group in the United Way system. It happened here in Columbus, Ohio. I then went to help Stonewall build their community center. That was awesome. And then the last few years, I've been working really hard with the folks on this panel with the LGBTQ roundtable, and we have really tackled some very big stuff, and I'm really proud of that. And finally, I'll just end. Right now, I'm working at the Edge Innovation Center, which is really cool. All the things I've learned, I'm bringing into that innovation space, which includes diversity and inclusion and equity, definitely equity. And I'm doing this little program called 7 Minutes of Sunshine. And all of you have already been on my show where we talk about values and superpower and inspire folks. And I want to thank you all for doing that as well. So I keep doing that. And many of you out there, watch out. I'm going to come get you and make you be on my show.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you, first of all, for being so, open to sharing your story and for all the service that you've done. And you're stealing my points. I'm like, I can't talk about Pride United now. You already mentioned it, but your leadership has really paved the way for even United Way in our journey of supporting the LGBT community. So thank you for that. So Karen, on to you. Thank you.
I always have to figure out how robust the intro is. So I really appreciate the space to be able to say all the things because it's really important. And so I've learned things about both of these people that I did not know, and I know them pretty well. So that is exciting. I started out and went to college for math. So I'm a math degree undergrad, and I also played basketball in college. And so I stayed and coached basketball in college. And so that was kind of where I was like, okay, I want to work with young people, but like mentor, coach, deal with that thing. And I also taught adjunct professor at my university. So I got to stay at my university and play there. And then came home for a year, taught high school. And then I wound up going to coach at Ohio University and University of Kentucky. And then I decided that I wanted my life back and a little bit of my time back. So I got my master's at the Ohio State for educational policy and leadership. And that's when I started working in human resources and strategic human capital, workforce development, all those nice ways of saying, you know, managing and dealing with folks. Coaching adults, if you will, is what I would like to call it. And so coming to Kaleidoscope was the culmination of all of the things that I care about. I was doing some advocacy work. I wound up doing work with a couple organizations in HR, as well as coming back, I was managing in the construction industry. And then I came back and I got to work with youth and be an advocate and also still be in that educational mentoring and coaching space over at Kaleidoscope, where I've been for the last 3 years. So it has been wonderful doing that. I'm also a creative, and I have a couple books. I'm a poet and a drag king, which is back on display here after a couple of years in hiding. And then I also work with the Ohio Rest Collective, and the REST stands for Restorative Equity through Sustainable Transformation. And that was something that we created to be a safe space in terms of regulating nervous systems for activists, for organizers, for community, for organizations, for individuals, because we are all working from some activated nervous systems. And so that was something where we got together and decided to do that. And it's, you know, something I enjoy and something I wish I had more time to do, but it is definitely the work of being involved and advocating. So I'm first and foremost for youth, because they know a lot more than we do, and they understand a lot more than we do. And so I think if we let them lead us a little bit, then we could be in a better situation than maybe we find ourselves in currently. Also, you know, the most marginalized, I'm gonna always be a non-negotiable stand for the most marginalized, those who don't have voices. And even in using my voice, making sure that even if it shakes, that I use it as someone who is non-gender conforming, visibly Black. Those are the people that I stand for and advocate for. And if they aren't at the table, if I'm at the table, then at least we're hearing something about considering and getting them to the table.
Thank you, Karen. I am so glad you brought the last point up, especially. Yeah, I like the comment. It's already in the comments of even if it shakes using your voice. I feel like
Now you're a weed. I'm not going to take that quote for it, but yeah.
Oh no, I mean, I love it. We can
Yeah.
do it to you. But I appreciate you all again for sharing your stories and how you got to where you are, and you know who you advocate for, and the passion that goes behind that from all of you is exemplary. I haven't met a lot of people that have their passion for community as much as the three of you do. So I'm going to keep thanking you this whole time. So thank you again for that. You all kind of touched on this a little bit about, you know, how we all got to work together a little bit more with the LGBTQ leadership roundtable at Stonewall. So through that, you know, we meet monthly, we bring all those brains and ideas and work in a single space, which I love. But if you could all touch a little bit more on the general, more collective power of our community, and all the different initiatives that we've worked on together, and things that we're pushing for in the future, I would love to hear that. And that's an open-ended question for anybody.
I can start for that one. We'll just reverse it back. I think working with the Leadership Roundtable and even being on the steering committee, you know, we never want to forget times when there's been maybe disconnects or fractures in the community. And I think the roundtable exists as a place where there is a lot of collective power. There is a lot of voices and leadership. And, you know, when you think about 2017 and some things that happened, that was really the beginning of us coming in together to community to see what we could do. And that doesn't mean that there weren't missteps or that, you know, repair didn't happen when it should have. Like there's all those, that nuance in terms of the relationship. But I think what we've been able to do over the last, 5 years or so is come together and see what we can do together, and realizing that if we uplift and center the voices of the most marginalized, that we will in turn account for everyone. And if the most marginalized are safe and heard, then everyone is safe and heard. And so I think that has been the biggest part of the collective power in my mind. Is I always want to acknowledge, if there is a fracture or disconnect or harm or something like that, if there's repair. And I think everybody here has, in my experience, been committed to repair. And so I think that's the most powerful thing that you can do when we're all human and working through all of our different stuff. We all have our stuff. And so when we're all working through that, if we can come and say we're committed to repair and we're going to keep showing up, I'm really grateful for the people in this room that keep showing up and ready to support whoever needs.
Thank you, Karen. I was leaving space to see if Kimberly and Tom, you wanted to jump in with anything here.
Kimberly, go for it. You go first, I'll go second.
All right. I was kind of following Karen's lead with going back the other way, so I was waiting. So I guess I really got involved with this fairly recently, in one sense, after a meeting that we had back when we were meeting in person in I think it was early 2020. I approached Tom in response to his call out for about helping to develop value statements and some updated policies and things like that for the roundtable. And so I thought, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to help with this committee and do this. Well, as things in our committee kind of evolved into this leadership steering committee, which is also generating planning and policy for the group. And we developed the meeting agendas, educational things, historical, community speakers, value statements that we have actually done a really, really good job with, I think, in developing that. And we did that by gathering it from a lot of the members in the roundtable, and looked at their involvement in their values, and which I think also kind of grew into the 7 minutes of sunshine that Tom does, and which a great job. If you've not watched that, please do. So it's 7:07 every morning, well, every weekday, most weekday morning. And then also getting from members their prioritization, their focus goals, looking at future planning for the roundtable and also for the steering committee, trying to look at emergency response to issues and how we're going to handle that, which I think Karen alluded to. The governance of the steering committee itself, community collaboration with other organizations. Out of the roundtable has grown the START program, which is a monthly anti-racism discussions that some of us have been involved with. And then responding to critical call for change, which the Queer Partnership for Black Liberation, which has been formed fairly recently, is doing great work. And I think is really calling our attention and focusing on issues that are actually really, really vital and that we need to make sure that we're addressing, looking at as far as anyone marginalized within the community. So that's kind of what I see we're working to do, and we've been working on.
So I'll just thank you, Kimberly and Karen. I'll just add a couple things. In 2017, the roundtable has been going on for, gosh, over 30 years. And it is unique in the country, where LGBTQ leaders from various LGBTQ organizations come together and work together. And it's made a big difference in Columbus through the years, and it's had
Did we lose Tom? Yeah.
It was in for me too, yeah.
Okay. Oh, Tom, you're back.
You're back.
Sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Gosh darn it. Okay, so what I was just saying was the roundtable has been going on for about 30 years, and it's unique in the country. There's very few. In fact, we might have been the only one for a while, and some folks have copied us. but having LGBTQ plus leadership come together to work together on problems, to work together to use collective power. But the roundtable's been up and down through the years. And in 2017, when Stonewall Pride, when the arrest took place, there wasn't a lot of participation at the time. There was probably 8 or 10 folks joining that roundtable, and there was a little bit of infighting going on in the community with leadership. It was a little bit dysfunctional. So when things went down in 2017, it's just the folks were just not in a position or ready to work together to really get to the root of what was going on and to start talking about it and dealing with it. So it was rough. It was really rough. And so it was at that time, frankly, that a lot of folks came back to the table, Karen and Kimberly being 2, Shaban came back to the table. And if they hadn't, I don't know where we would be today. Came back to the table and helped us get our heads on straight, frankly, get back to where we started and spend the time to develop our values. What are our shared values? And we went through some serious exercises to do that. And before the pandemic started, we had done this work, and we identified 8 values that we share: justice at the top, equity, respect, inclusion, collaboration, collective power, integrity, and accountability. And we as a group committed that we were going to use that lens of those values for all the work that we do go forward. And gosh darn it, when the pandemic went down, folks just leaned in extra hard with those values. And we went from meeting once a month to meeting a couple times a week via Zoom. And we put out a joint statement understanding that we needed to help each other get through this. And then, frankly, in the summer, when social justice issues really took the forefront, we took it up another notch, and many of us understood that it was time to really have other folks step up and lead and give the space to do that. And it has happened. And I know we have a lot of work to do, but I guess I'm just so proud of these group of leaders. And we are now 40 to 50 folks strong, regular in attendance, committed to those values, and we'll continue to process through and try to get better so that we can help make Columbus more welcoming for everybody.
Thank you all. I appreciate that so much. And I will say I stepped into this role and into the Leadership Roundtable 2-ish years ago. And before that, I was familiar with it through my work with OSU and working with the Multicultural Center there as a student. And I've seen it change drastically, even within the last year, within the pandemic in itself, the focus and how much we've been honing in into supporting those most marginalized by, signing ordinances or requests for support from the city, from all of our community leaders, as well as organization leaders, has been amazing. And, as queer folk, we usually are seen as marginalized, but the power we hold, I've seen be immense and create a lot of ripples into how the community changes because of our willingness to push for change. So having you 3 on that leadership level of that roundtable, I think is just phenomenal, and kudos to all of you, and thank you for the work again. Again, I feel like every time I speak, I'm just going to thank you. So get used to it at this point. Trying to read this question that we have in the chat, but in the meantime, while I go through that, Tom, you touched a little bit on the pandemic. I would love if you could spend a few minutes talking a little bit about the work and the people that you work with and how COVID affected the situations. And then I also want to touch on the equity side of things a little bit in ties with COVID. So if you'd like to spend a few minutes talking about that, we can start. Tom, if you want to go first again this time, that'd be great.
Just keep reversing order back. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll keep it short because I really want to hear more from Kimberly and Karen, to be honest. I really would like to hear more from their perspective. I just know that we could, I think, like many organizations or leaders, we could have stepped back, and I think a lot of people decided to lean into what was going on. And in that process, there was a real sense of urgency, I think. And because we had done the work, the values work, there was more trust developed, even though there needed to be more. I understand that for sure. And so I'm going to leave it open at that, because I really like to hear more from Kimberly and Karen. But I think there had been some, because of 2017, there had been some work done. And that helped position us, I think, to lean in during a time that we were really needed. So I'll let my other panelists go from there.
Thank you, Tom. Karen, would you want to share?
I'm trying to figure out what angle to address this at, because there's a lot of the place. I think when you think about people who have, the most marginalized, like there have been people screaming about inequities and feeling almost like it's screaming into the void for years. And I think it can get you to a lot of responses. So I know that, I'm in a lot of meetings saying the same things, like, did we remember non-binary people? Did we remember trans folks? Trans women are women, trans men are men, like those type of things. Like those are like sound bites that I could probably have, on a recorder. And I think it's important to acknowledge that can bring its own version, however it will play out, of resentment and bitterness, is to honestly have to keep saying the same thing. And then because the nation does it, it is now it's time, and that can be frustrating. And I think there is a level of my own work that I have to do to come to the table and still come from it from a health seeking and a relationship healing vantage point. And I do that work, and I do it daily. And I think, when we talk about relationships are so important. So if there's some things that happen, I think it's important to have relationship, because then I can go and say, this hurt me and this harmed me. And but I have to be seeking resolution. Right. And so I think, when we talk about, accountability and all of those, terms that a lot of folks are using kind of interchangeably with justice, which I wouldn't do. But when we talk about accountability, I think, naming things is so powerful. And I think what this last year has done is given us a space to actually name it, because a lot of times we were naming it and it was being dismissed. And so now to be able to name it and have people be like, yes, let's go deeper with that. Let's lean in. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about ways that someone could, still show up, heal, have access. Because to me, equity is access to resources and the same things that people have access to: joy, celebrating, thriving, all of those things. That's equity to me. And to be able to be in a space where we can say, oh, this is important. And for all those voices that haven't been heard, like, we hear you. And it is time for us to collectively get together and stand up in the right way. I think it's been a powerful year of really understanding and having shared language around equity, accountability, repair, harm, acknowledgement, all those things. And it's not easy, and it's a long road. And I once you step into this work, like you commit to it, but you also hopefully commit to yourself, and sometimes that might mean breaks or whatever that looks like. But the commitment is really challenging and nuanced and difficult. And I think everybody here has taken that step, and it could lead into a lot of ways and a lot of conversations. But it's definitely a complicated and complex journey. I'll say that.
No, I appreciate that, Karen, and I'm right there with you. The whole, journey of JEDI, as we like to call it, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and everything that comes with it. it's hard, right? Even for the people that have the resources to do so, embracing it and bringing people in and giving that access to the resources, I think is so important to not just the people that live and breathe it and want to better themselves, but to the rest of the community that keeps asking for it. So I know it takes a toll. So make sure, I guess, to your point, take care of yourselves out there, and all three of you in this call, breathe and look up for the Rest Collective if you want those experiences, because they provide awesome services. So shameless plugs are allowed during this call, so we're going to continue with that theme. But Kimberly, yeah, I would love to hear your experiences as well and your outlook.
Well, I guess I'll mention first from the standpoint of OCTOPUS LLC. We switched to the Zoom platform for our former in-person peer support group meetings. My access to the prison where I worked with support and education for the incarcerated folks was, and still is at this point, shut down. Many community members who were building towards greater visibility and community involvement became more isolated and reclusive. I noticed that. There was the income loss of people from employment. It hit many folks hard, and homelessness, I think, has grown, actually. Conferences were canceled and moved to online with fewer offerings and a lot of the in-person human element. So there was, very little to no networking, no hugs. My participation on the panels has increased, I think, since this happened. Support group meetings are welcoming more participation from all over Ohio. So there are some maybe some illuminations or lights for the future on doing this. But so to keep this going, I'm hoping that when we go back to in-person, I can include Zoom participation and keep this open to people from all over the state of Ohio. As far as the equity element, we are all born into disparate circumstances that are beyond our control, dictating the barriers to opportunity that stand in our way. It's time now, and I think we've realized that, to refocus our corporate and our governmental goals away from the accumulation of assets and the stockpiling of financial wealth and toward genuine service to humanity. Until we learn to change our outlook accordingly, our nation and our world will never achieve a level of respect for every individual that holds out real hope for true egalitarian social justice. The U.S. system, has been rife with racial inequality and injustice and discrimination for over 400 years, with slavery, Jim Crow legislation, mass incarceration, law enforcement killings of Black folks. The system needs so many changes. We need to end gerrymandering, we need to stop gentrification, end law enforcement qualified immunity, support inclusive voting rights, free minimum wage from stagnation, pass universal health care, support pro-choice legislation. And, there are just so many disparities as far as we need school athletic participation for trans students, which is being threatened all across the country. Trans and non-binary healthcare for trans youth is being threatened in some states. We need to make sure that hate crime status to protect trans folks and LGBT folks is right there and available as a resource. Inclusive trans restroom and locker room access is being threatened and has been for a while now. Trans document assimilation, we're finally getting an opportunity here in Ohio to change our gender markers on our birth certificates, which has been long coming. We're right up there in the lead with that, it being the 49th state instead of one of the first states to do that. So little sarcasm intended there. And also, we need insurance changes to make sure that everyone is covered for the trans community. HRT access, surgical access, hair removal access, voice therapy. We need all these things covered because there's so many people that are desperate to make these changes, and it's just not something that is available to everyone. It is in some extents and in some situations getting somewhat better, but we've got a long way to go.
Ooh, I appreciate that, Kimberly. I'm sitting in all of that, and I hope everybody that's listening is also feeling the same way. You know, I think you all know this on this call. A lot of people think, 2015 happened, we got marriage equality, and all our problems were solved. And we're still sitting in all of this, ambiguity of legislation and getting pushback from people that don't even want to listen or get to know people like us. So I appreciate, number one, the work that you do to advocate for everything that you advocate for, and then the fact that we're having this kind of conversations and you're being so candid with us, I think is really important for everybody listening. I will say, as United Way and where we sit in the community, our mission is really clear. It's to end poverty, it's to mobilize our community and bring everybody together as a collective to do that. I think from my perspective, what this year has allowed us to do is to really take a look at, we've done all this work and obviously support equity and the community in different ways, but how are we really changing the systems that are allowing for this continual cycle of poverty to exist. And with that, especially when it comes to the LGBT community that we serve, it's another prong that we can never forget about, right? There's all these kids that live in poverty that identify in the queer spectrum, and there's no real, backing or support to them through the systems if we don't stand up and create organizations like KYC, like OCTOPUS, like Equality Ohio that supports them. So I'm so appreciative of the work that you're all involved in, and I know that we still have a lot to go through to get to where we want to be, where everybody just exists in their skin and can feel both safe and privileged enough to be able to do that. But we're, I think, having some awesome people do the work to get us there. And I don't want to get emotional today. I promised myself I'm not going to get there, but I might. So get ready, everybody. But I have a lot of questions here that I wanted to ask you, but I feel like the conversation is taking us to a little bit more of a path of, legislation, experience, and kind of necessity of our community to change. So I'd like to kind of spend a few more minutes on that of, for example, we just got a new police chief announced with Chief Bryan yesterday officially. And that's also been a big conversation, both with the LGBT community and then obviously the Black community and policing and issues there. So I'd love if we could spend a few more minutes on like the legislation piece, as well as more so of like public safety and what we need as the queer community to feel safe, both during Pride celebrations as well as more year-round calendar. And I don't want to pick anybody. I just dumped a lot of info, so feel free.
I'll talk a little bit. I am a member of the Queer Partnership for Black Liberation. So I have been in a lot of conversations about these things, and it is so complex and nuanced. And so I just want to caveat it by saying that. And I think in terms of public safety, like I also do facilitations on anti-racism, transformative justice, diversity management, leadership development, that kind of thing. And, I am in rooms and sometimes I don't realize it until I'm in the room. I'm saying things that 2 years ago, people weren't trying to hear, and I was saying the same things then. So, I'm saying some of the same things in those rooms. And because there are still folks that, when I talk about non-negotiables or things that I won't entertain or have conversations about, we intellectualize Black death a lot. And so a lot of, social media obviously has played its role in the last year. And so a lot of times those conversations are saying, well, did they deserve to die or did they not? I'm not even having that conversation. I'm telling you that right now. I'm not going to have that conversation on social media. I'm not having it live. I'm not going to go there. I think that we can all acknowledge that the system is not broken, is doing what it's supposed to do. So when I say that, I'm like, okay, so what does that mean in terms of conversation and building relationship and educating? So yes, there is a piece that education is important. And there's also that piece where, does someone have the moral imperative to actually change, to actually shift their mindset, because we are taught racism. It is a language. Sonia Renee Taylor will say it's a language that we all are that's spoken around us all. And so how do we unlearn that or learn a different language? And so when we're talking about that, there is a piece that education can provide, but all the education in the world can't change a heart. And so when we look at that and look at the people who are serving us, like there is a call to action in terms of that. A lot of times in our adaptive responses we'll freeze because we don't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And I think the action is being in action is the most important thing, and still staying in conversation. Obviously care for yourself, but stay in conversation. And in terms of police, and the community does not feel safe or protected. And that's, it's not a monolith, but it doesn't, like as a whole, it doesn't feel safe and protected, especially in Black communities, and predominantly Black communities and Black and Brown communities. Like there's not safety there. And I think when you look at, hiring practices, when you look at being taught to de-escalate or not, or how police officers are trained, I think you have to, yes, there is a way that can happen. And like, we got to get people in here that are for the community. Like when you look at statistics, there aren't a lot of people living in Franklin County that are serving on Franklin County as police officers. So, there's a lot of things that we could, talk about in terms of trainings and things like that could shift things a little bit. But I think the hard part is staying engaged when you realize that some people may not ever shift their heart, and I might not see that in my lifetime. And that's something that I had to acknowledge and be aware of, and then still, fight the good fight, as get in good trouble, as John Lewis would say. So I think that is the hardest part, is to continue knowing that some people, like if you look on some of those comments on the news things about pride, like if you look at, like some people are just stuck in that, and that's where they want to be, and it's safe for them because they're not impacted by any of this, because they don't see anyone that doesn't look like them in their world. And to me, that's a horrible existence in and of itself, that pays for itself, like to not have anybody that is different from you, or to be able to celebrate somebody that's different from you. To me, that feels like a awful time. I wouldn't want to exist that way. So that serves what it serves. But I think there's a lot of conversations, but at the same time, like there is only one party or one side of arguments right now that has weaponry. And so when we think about that, that relationship has to shift in terms of power, in terms of weaponry, in terms of how we approach human life and how we discuss human life and how we advocate for human life, and that being our non-negotiable stand. I think that has to be where we start.
Karen, thank you, Karen. I'm, again, sitting on all of that. A lot of it is conversations that we've had in the past, and I can't say anything other than just well said. And I'm with you on every beat of what you just expressed. But I'll leave it at that for the audience to kind of digest. Kimberly, is there anything you'd like to share as well on that side? And then we'll go to Tom.
Karen responded so well to that. Thank you. I don't know if you'd mentioned that, like with the Pride situation, as far as safety, as far as that goes, I think we, not only because of COVID, but I think in the future, part of the solution is just going to be smaller Pride celebrations where we can gather, free from any homeland security or law enforcement interference with what we're doing. I think Community Pride has the right idea in trying to, provide a safe space without that involvement and interference. And I think they are continuing through the Big Quick's work to that they're going to have a Pride in October, expressing that. So hopefully that will take place. The law enforcement interference and risk of escalation threatens our own Black, queer, and trans community. I think we need to look at ending law enforcement qualified immunity. We need to look real strongly at the stranglehold that the FOP has on our, the situation. We need to bring back control of law enforcement to the people, to the citizenry, who can provide things such as mental health care without necessarily having someone from law enforcement maybe even be involved with it at all. And so, maybe not immediately defunding police, but I think we need to work towards a community where we are very cognizant of people's needs. We need to stop the killing, especially of Black people and everyone who's being killed by law enforcement. Newark, New Jersey, I think, went through a year without barely firing a shot. So it can be done. I think it can be done. And our, some of the legislation too that's happening, it's threatening our very right to protest in itself, and that can't be. We just can't let that happen, because that's one of that and getting hold of legislators and lobbying for change. Protest is one of the major ways that we bring about change, and so that just can't end. Education of everyone is important, but like Karen said, people have to be open to that. And so, I guess that's kind of my thought on it.
Thank you, Kimberly. Tom?
Beautiful stuff. So from my perspective and my lens, it is more about the values that I adhere to. And the last couple of years, I've just learned so much, and I've learned so much from the other two panelists here personally, through some really hard conversations at times, frankly, and some brave, courageous conversations. So for folks like me out there, if we haven't learned it yet, we better get it. And that is empathy, and that is vulnerability, and that is centering the most marginalized members of our community, centering them. And understanding that as we've won some rights along the way, there's still so much work to do. And to think that we're just going to move on and not make sure we're all there at the table, that's pretty damn selfish. So I guess my advice to me, myself, and others, especially those of us that were scared to death 20, 30 years ago because we were going to get beat up and being called faggot, right? Things have changed, not for everybody, but things have changed in a lot of ways, but things haven't changed for some other folks. So we got to stay in the fight. We have got to show up, and we have got to let others speak. And that's been a real challenge for some of us who had to learn to find our own voice, that sometimes being quiet and supporting is the most important thing that you can do. And since Karen brought up Sonia Renee Taylor, I did want to read a quote that I share every day on my 7 Minutes of Sunshine program. And that is, this is from Sonia Renee Taylor: "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed and equity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction. We should not long return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." So I'm here to help stitch, and I don't have to pull every thread, right? I need to be there and help support others and getting some of those threads in that new garment. And that's what I'd like us all to try to do, is show up and help.
Thank you, Tom. I love the quote. Yeah, I was going to say thank you, Karen, for putting the name in. And then Kimberly, if you want to address the question.
I just wanted to add something. I saw that James Knapp from co-chair of Trans Ohio reached out. And as far as resources for trying to find out information about the legislation, I think if you stay in touch with organizations such as Trans Ohio and Equality Ohio, and HRC, ACLU, and to some extent, I think Equitas Health has information as well. These organizations work with us on a frequent basis, and so there's a lot of opportunity out there to find out more about this legislation, and also just follow the legislation itself. If look at what your legislators are doing, and maybe that'll help with your voting in the future.
Thank you, Kimberly. We don't have too much time left, and I want to keep this conversation going forever, but it doesn't work that way. But before I ask my last question, which is a little bit more on a positive note, is there anything that any one of you wants to kind of share as a last takeaway from your world and your experiences? Putting you on the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to ask.
I have a quote.
There you go.
Right here. It's just a quote. I'm not gonna, but this was from Omolara Uwemedimo, and it went pretty viral. But resilient has been the word that people have used a lot, and for pandemic times especially, but in general for Black and Brown folks, that people are resilient. And this quote was said, and I really resonated with it. And I think this is a great starting point too, in terms of people when they're like, what can we do? It says, I don't need you to praise me for my resilience. I need you to stop creating spaces of trauma where being resilient is all I'm allowed to be, where we reclaim all of our emotions, where we take up all the room and you get uncomfortable, because it's time you learn to be resilient. So I'll just leave that there.
Thank you, Karen. That was awesome. And I'm going to put that on a poster and look at it every day because I need it. And I'm not kidding, actually. That's going to happen, but thank you. Kim, Tom, anything you'd like to add? I know, Tom, you ended on an awesome quote as well. Okay, so I'll ask this question just because it's June. Not that Pride, is limited to just this month, but I did want to end on knowing how you experience Pride and what Pride means to you. Am I gonna have to pick? Okay, Kimberly, should I go with you first? Thank you.
All right. I guess what Pride kind of means to me, it's the ability to visibly and publicly celebrate our LGBTQ plus history, and most of all, our own opportunity to live authentically and free ourselves from any guilt or barriers preventing us from doing that. My experience with Pride, I marched in a couple of parades, and I've been involved with that. I'm relatively new to the whole LGBTQ community in the sense that I've only been a part of it since like 2014, 15. Aware of it, but just on the periphery until more recently. So until I transitioned. But I feel differently about it even than I did when I first transitioned. I think 2017 really brought home, what can happen and how things, the joy can be taken right out of our celebration and our acknowledgement of ourselves. And so I'm glad we have Pride. I think it's very, very important and an opportunity to celebrate, and I support those who do. I enjoy others enjoying it. I'm not quite back there yet to where I was initially.
I appreciate that and you being open about that, Kimberly. And it's interesting to hear that. I honestly, even personally, have to go through that process of identifying how I experience it, and pretty close to where you are, I think. Karen, I'll go with you second this time.
I was just thinking about this, and it's, you know, it's complicated, so I'll try to condense it as much as possible. When I think about pride specifically and what it takes to show up, you know, visibility is a privilege in a way, to be able to show up and feel safe. And so in a lot of my practices, polarity, emotional intelligence, healing, all that stuff, when I think about safety, I believe it's first acknowledging that it is my birthright to exist and I deserve to live and I deserve to thrive, not just survive. And then when I think about, you know, safety, I can't ever guarantee safety. I can't, you know, there's so much going on in Columbus in and of itself before I even say the world, Columbus, where it's, I can't guarantee safety. I can't guarantee I'm going to come home every night. And I think that it's so important to first acknowledge that truth, and then it's a choice to show up and to be visible and to be a representative and to advocate and show up 2 feet on the ground and have joy. Like it's revolutionary to celebrate, to have joy, to laugh. And if that's how I leave this earth, then that'll be fine. I think it's really important to, like, that's an everyday thing. Like that's an everyday thought when I walk out my doors. Like, I don't know. Like I'm in the world, like I'm seen, like people can find me easily. Like I'm so easily accessible. And I think that choosing to still show up is a lot more than people realize that it requires. I generally get up around 6 o'clock and I'm 2:11 before I interact with any human being, doing all the things that make my mind very happy in terms of organizing, meditating, all that kind of stuff. And it is a daily practice. And then I'm like, okay, now I have to go be with the world. And then I come back and the night shuts down pretty early, mostly. But it is a choice to allow myself that space to heal and that space to sit and be safe within, because I know I'm safe here. I know I'm safe within myself, and I know I have to affirm myself and care for myself first. And then sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad being visible in the world. Sometimes it's somewhere in between, but it's a lot of work. And so just continuing to do that unpacking and that healing and that regulating after being activated and being in the world. I think for me, pride is those choices daily of what to do and how to navigate, you know, a world, a city that doesn't necessarily want to see you coming through the door or want to see you thrive and is not built for you.
Thank you, Karen.
Ooh,
Yeah.
good words. Oh my goodness. Well, I'll just be brief as possible. Just to share that. So just, you know, many of us who are older in the LGBTQ community as well, when it was, you could get arrested for being gay. And for, you know, the first folks that marched at Stonewall, Columbus 40 years ago with bags over their heads because they knew they were going to get fired. I have gratitude for the steps we've taken. I have gratitude for the fact that I'm married to my husband, who I've been with for 15 years. And then we've been able to co-adopt our children, Amrit and Sophia, which is, I can't even begin to explain how amazing that is to me. And I first saw that in 1993 at a Stonewall Columbus Pride Parade, when I saw 2 men with a baby. Sounds like a movie. 2 men with a baby. And I said, shit, I'm what? I can do that. And that just shows you that the visibility, the courage to be visible, and it's harder for some than others. It's harder for some than others because it's still not safe for so many. But the courage to be visible and try to find those safe spaces and make safe spaces is what pride is all about. It's starting with ourself and making sure that we have the safe spaces in ourself, because there's a lot of voices that continue to run in our head to tell us that we're a piece of shit, and we're not. None of us are. So that's my message for pride, is to really embrace it and to be as whole as we possibly can, to get rid of the fragmentation that happens because we're trying to fit in with other people's expectations, but that we're authentically who we are everywhere, 365 days a year.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Karen. And thank you, Kimberly. And that's an amazing note to end on. And I appreciate your, you know, being able to just open up to both me and everybody that's listening about who you are and your essence and your commitment both to the community and making the world a better place at the end of the day. I have had the utmost respect for all of you and love for all of you. And that's something that I've wanted to touch on because I think we don't say that enough. But I want to say I love all of you and I appreciate you. And to the larger audience, now we're closing it officially. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I know we're a little bit over time, but I hope that this event really did encourage you to explore a lot more of our community, a lot of more of the opportunities that lie here within Columbus and Central Ohio in helping more of our LGBT community as well as our neighborhoods as a whole. For more information on how to get involved, you can go to liveunitedcentralohio.org/events. That has the next series that's coming up through June, 614 Day, and then a Juneteenth conversation. So please join me one last time with that in saying thank you to our panelists. Happy Pride, and I'm gonna actually clap again for all of you and then end this call. So thank you all. Much love. I enjoy you and hope you have a lovely, lovely rest of your day. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.